The moment my husband's casket disappeared beneath a blanket of white lilies, a woman dressed entirely in black stepped out from the back of the cemetery and walked straight toward me. She didn't offer condolences. She didn't introduce herself. Instead, she placed an old gold ring into my trembling hand. I recognized the tiny scratch beneath the opal instantly. 43 years ago, Michael told me he had buried that ring with our baby daughter. The woman looked into my eyes with a sadness that felt older than both of us. "He never buried it," she whispered. Then she took one slow step backward and shattered the life I thought I had lived. "Your daughter was never in that grave." Before I could speak, she turned and disappeared among the mourners. If this story touches something deep inside you, I'd love to hear from you before we go any further. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had been hiding the truth for years? What would you have done if you were standing where I was that day? Please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you're enjoying stories about family love and long-buried secrets, I'd truly appreciate it if you'd like this video and subscribe. Finally, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and who's spending this moment with me. I stood there for several seconds after the woman disappeared. The ring felt strangely warm in my hand, not because of the afternoon sun, because every memory attached to it came rushing back at once. For 43 years, I had believed that little gold ring rested beneath 6 feet of Virginia soil, inside the tiny white casket of my baby girl. Michael had looked into my eyes and promised me he placed it there himself. Now it was sitting in my palm, solid, real, impossible. Someone gently touched my shoulder. "Susan?" It was my son, Ryan. His voice sounded distant, almost muffled, as if I were underwater. "You okay?" I quickly closed my fingers around the ring. I just need a minute." Ryan studied my face. He had Michael's eyes, the same calm expression, the same way of watching people before speaking. "You look pale." "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." He glanced toward the cemetery entrance. "Who was that woman?" "I don't know." That wasn't entirely true. I knew one thing. She knew something about my daughter, something no stranger should know. Ryan looked around. She disappeared fast. I nodded without answering. The funeral director approached us. "I'm very sorry for your loss, Mrs. Gallagher." I thanked him automatically. Everything after that felt mechanical. People hugged me, people cried, people repeated the same sentences. Michael was a wonderful man. He'll be missed. He loved you so much. I smiled politely. Inside my mind replayed only one sentence. Your daughter was never in that grave. I couldn't breathe. The reception was held at our church fellowship hall. Michael had attended services there for almost 40 years. He knew everyone. Everyone knew him. The room buzzed with quiet conversations. Coffee, sandwiches, soft piano music. The smell reminded me of every church gathering I'd attended since childhood. Normally, it brought comfort. Today, it made me feel trapped. I slipped into a corner table. For the first time since the funeral, I opened my hand. The ring looked exactly as I remembered. The small, oval opal reflected tiny flashes of blue and green beneath the lights. There was the faint scratch beneath the stone. I had made that scratch myself when I was 17 while helping my father repair an old fence. No copy could reproduce that accident. This was my ring. Michael had lied. A shadow fell across my table. I looked up. The woman in black stood there again. She had somehow entered the reception without anyone noticing. She looked younger than I first thought. Maybe early 40s. Dark hair pulled neatly behind her shoulders. Kind brown eyes. eyes that seemed filled with years of sadness. She spoke softly. "My name is Emily. Nothing more. No last name. No explanation." I stared at her. "Who are you?" She hesitated. "I'll answer every question." "Then answer this one." "Not here." I gripped the ring tighter. "Where did you get this?" I promised him I'd return it only after his funeral. "Him? Michael?" Hearing my husband's name from her lips made my stomach tighten. "You knew my husband?" She nodded once. "For 2 years." My heartbeat quickened. 2 years? Michael had hidden an entire relationship from me. What kind? Friends, clients? Something worse, Emily seemed to read my thoughts. "It wasn't what you're thinking." "You don't know what I'm thinking." "No?" She lowered her eyes. "But I know what you're afraid of." I wanted to ask another question. Instead, she reached into her handbag. She removed a thick cream-colored envelope. Without anyone noticing, she slipped it gently into my purse, hanging beside my chair. "Please don't open it until you're alone." "What is it?" "The truth." Before I could stop her, another voice cut through the room. "Susan." I turned. Margaret Doyle, Michael's older sister. She walked quickly toward us. For 72 years, Margaret had carried herself like someone permanently in charge. Perfect gray hair, perfect posture, perfect smile. Today, that smile vanished the instant she saw the ring. Her face lost all color. For just 1 second. Then she recovered. "What is she doing here?" Emily didn't answer. Margaret stepped between us. "I asked you a question." Emily calmly looked at her. "I came to keep a promise." Margaret's jaw tightened. "You need to leave." I had never heard Margaret sound frightened before. Not angry, frightened. She turned toward me. "Susan, don't listen to this woman." "You know her?" Margaret answered too quickly. "No." Then she glanced at Emily again. "I mean, I've heard about her." Emily remained silent. That silence spoke louder than any argument. I looked back and forth between them. Something invisible connected these two women. Something old. Something dangerous. Ryan walked over carrying 2 cups of coffee. He immediately sensed the tension. "Everything okay?" Margaret answered before anyone else could. "No." She pointed directly at Emily. "This woman is trying to take advantage of your mother's grief." Ryan frowned. "What?" Emily finally spoke. "I don't want your father's money." Ryan crossed his arms. "Then why are you here?" "I came because your father asked me to." "My father is dead." "I know." Ryan's voice became harder. "Did you know him?" "Yes." "How?" Emily looked toward me. "I promised him I wouldn't explain until Susan was ready." Ryan shook his head. "This is unbelievable." Margaret stepped beside him. "Ryan, please ask security to escort her outside." Emily didn't move. She simply looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I'm sorry this had to happen today." I finally found my voice. "Wait." Everyone looked at me. I swallowed. "What did Michael tell you?" Emily's answer came quietly. "He told me he should have chosen truth 43 years ago." The room suddenly felt silent, even though people were still talking all around us. 43 years, the exact age my daughter would have been. Margaret grabbed Ryan's arm. "Please." Ryan looked confused, then embarrassed, finally protective. "I'm sorry, ma'am." He faced Emily. "I think you should leave." Emily nodded. "I understand." She turned toward the exit. Halfway there, she stopped. Without looking back, She said one final sentence. Your husband wanted you to know everything before he died. Then she disappeared through the church doors. I stared after her. Margaret slowly released a breath. Too slowly, like someone who had escaped disaster. I noticed it. She noticed that I noticed. For the first time in my life, Michael's sister couldn't meet my eyes. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Neighbors stopped by. Church friends hugged me. Former clients shared stories about Michael's kindness. I heard none of it. Every few minutes, my hand slipped inside my purse, feeling the edge of that sealed envelope. It seemed heavier than paper should, almost like it carried the weight of my entire marriage. By early evening, the last guest had left. Ryan drove me home. Neither of us spoke much during the ride. When we pulled into the driveway, he squeezed my hand. You don't have to go through tonight alone. I'll be okay. You sure? I forced a smile. I've survived worse. He kissed my forehead. I'll come by tomorrow morning. I'd like that. After he left, I walked through the quiet house. Michael's coat still hung beside the front door. His reading glasses still rested on the kitchen counter. His favorite mug still sat beside the coffee maker. Everything looked exactly the same, except nothing was. I locked the front door, closed every curtain, turned off my phone, then I carried my purse into the living room. The envelope was still inside, untouched. No return address, only 2 words written neatly across the front. For Susan. My fingers trembled as I reached for the seal. Then I stopped. If I opened it, there would be no going back. Whatever waited inside had already destroyed the story I believed for 43 years. I sat there in complete silence, holding the envelope in both hands, wondering whether the truth could hurt more than the grief I had already lived with for nearly half my life. I stared at the envelope for almost an hour before I found the courage to break the seal. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. For 44 years, Michael had been the one person I trusted without question. We had built a home together, raised a son together, buried heartbreak together, or at least I thought we had. I finally slid my finger beneath the flap. Inside were only 3 things: a folded hospital document, a handwritten letter, and a faded photograph. I picked up the photograph first. It showed Michael standing outside a brick building I didn't recognize. He looked older than I remembered in those years. His hair had turned almost completely gray. Standing beside him was Emily. They weren't hugging. They weren't holding hands. They stood a few feet apart, looking uncomfortable. It wasn't the picture of lovers. It looked more like 2 strangers carrying the same burden. I turned the photo over. On the back, Michael had written only one sentence. Forgive me for waiting too long? A chill ran through my body. I set the picture aside. Next came the hospital document. The paper had yellowed with age. Across the top were the words, Richmond Memorial Hospital. Date October 14th, 1983. That was the day after Anna was born. My eyes scanned the page. Mother, Susan Gallagher. Infant baby girl Gallagher. Condition stable. I read it again, then again. Stable. Not deceased. Not critical. Stable. I felt as if someone had punched me in the chest. No! The word escaped my lips before I realized I had spoken aloud. This can't be right. Michael had looked into my eyes. He had cried. He had held my hand. He had told me our daughter stopped breathing. Had he lied while pretending to grieve beside me? I searched the page desperately. There had to be another explanation. Another patient. Another family. But everything matched. My name. Michael's name. The room number. Even my doctor's signature. Then I noticed something else. A handwritten note near the bottom. Transferred. The destination had been blacked out. Someone had deliberately covered it with thick black ink. Why who transfers a dead baby? I suddenly couldn't breathe. 43 years. 43 Mother's Days. 43 birthdays spent crying beside a tiny grave. What if I had been mourning a child who never died? Tears blurred my vision. I reached for Michael's letter. Unlike the hospital paper, it looked new. The handwriting was unmistakably his. Slow, neat, careful, exactly the way he wrote every birthday card. I unfolded it. Susan, if you are reading this, then I no longer have the courage to tell you myself. That is my greatest failure. You deserved the truth decades ago. Instead, I chose silence because I believed silence would protect you. I know now that silence became its own kind of cruelty. I stopped reading. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I continued. I have lived every day knowing that I destroyed the trust of the woman I loved most. There is no excuse for what I did. There never was. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Michael had never written like this. Never. He was always careful with words. Practical. Measured. These words carried guilt. Real guilt. Then I reached the final paragraph. If there is one sentence, you must believe it is this. Anna was alive. Nothing else. No explanation. No names. Just 4 words. Anna was alive. The page slipped from my hands. I sat perfectly still. The house around me became silent. Even the old grandfather clock in the hallway seemed to stop ticking. I thought about the cemetery, about the tiny headstone. Every spring, I planted white lilies there. Every Christmas, I left a small angel. Every birthday, I whispered, I miss you. Had I been talking to empty ground, I suddenly remembered something I hadn't thought about in decades. The funeral. Everything had happened so quickly. I had begged Michael to let me see our daughter one last time. Just once. Just for a second. He had refused. Not angrily. Sadly. He held my face and said, You don't want to remember her like that. I had believed him. Then Margaret had stepped into the room. She wrapped her arms around me. She whispered, The baby's body is too fragile now. Too fragile. I repeated those words aloud. How strange they sounded now. Nobody else in our family ever saw the baby either. Not my parents. Not Michael's parents. Not our pastor. The casket stayed closed. Everyone simply accepted it. Because why would anyone question grieving parents? I covered my mouth. Oh my God. I stood so quickly, my chair tipped over. I began walking through the living room, then the kitchen, then back again. My thoughts raced faster than I could control them. If Anna had lived, where had she gone? Who took her? Why? And why would Michael hide it? I looked toward the hallway. His study door stood slightly open. Normally, I would never enter without knocking. Even after retirement, he liked having his own quiet space. Tonight, I walked inside. His desk remained exactly as he'd left it. Legal pads, family photographs, a fountain pen, reading glasses, his favorite Bible. Everything looked ordinary. Too ordinary. I opened the top drawer. Nothing. The second drawer, old tax returns. The third, office supplies. Then I noticed something, the wastebasket. Inside lay dozens of tiny strips of shredded paper. Michael always used the office shredder, never the wastebasket. I knelt down. The pieces looked fresh. Some still carried dark blue ink. Had he tried to destroy something before he died? I reached inside and gathered a handful. Impossible to read. Still, I placed them into a kitchen storage bag. Something told me not to throw them away. As I stood, my eyes landed on one picture sitting beside his desk lamp. It was taken on our 40th wedding anniversary. Michael had his arm around me. Ryan stood beside us, smiling. There was one empty chair at the table. I remembered joking that evening. "This seat is waiting for grandchildren." Michael smiled. But now I remembered something else. His smile hadn't reached his eyes. He had looked toward that empty chair several times during dinner. At the time, I thought he was simply tired. Now I wondered, had he been thinking about someone missing from the family? Someone he knew existed? Someone he had abandoned? A sudden knock at the front door startled me. I quickly wiped away my tears. Ryan. It had to be Ryan. I folded Michael's letter and slipped it into my pocket. When I opened the door, Ryan stood there holding a casserole dish. "I figured you wouldn't cook tonight." I forced a smile. "Thank you." He stepped inside. "You've been crying." "I've had a difficult evening." He nodded sympathetically. "I know." His eyes wandered toward the living room, then toward the study. "You've been looking through Dad's office. Just remembering him." He looked relieved. "I'm glad." For one brief moment, I almost handed him the hospital record, almost showed him the letter, almost told him everything. But I stopped. Not yet. If Michael had hidden this truth for 43 years, I needed more than one document before I shattered our son's world. Ryan noticed the envelope on the coffee table. "What's that?" "Oh." I quickly picked it up. "Just some papers." He smiled gently. "You should get some sleep." "I'll try." After he left, I locked the door again. I looked down at the letter still clutched in my hand. One sentence echoed inside my mind. Anna was alive. For 43 years, I believed I had lost my daughter. Tonight, for the first time, I wasn't mourning the dead. I was searching for the living. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw two images. A tiny white casket, and Emily standing in the cemetery, telling me my daughter had never been there. By sunrise, I had made one decision. I wasn't going to wait. If Michael had trusted Emily enough to leave her the ring, then she knew more than his letter revealed. I needed answers, not another mystery. I found the business card she had slipped inside the envelope with the hospital record. It had only one name: Emily Brooks. Beneath it was the address of a hospice center in Raleigh, North Carolina. A handwritten note appeared across the back. "If you're ready, meet me at Willow Creek Diner. Wednesday, 10 a.m. Today was Wednesday. At 9 o'clock, I called Ryan. "I'm driving out for the day." "Where?" "I just need some time." "You shouldn't be alone." "I'll be careful." He hesitated. "Is this about yesterday?" My hand tightened around the phone. No. The lie tasted bitter. "I'll be back tonight." An hour later, I pulled into the parking lot of a small country diner just outside Richmond. The place looked ordinary. Red brick walls, old pickup trucks, a faded sign advertising homemade pie. Emily was already inside. She sat alone in a booth near the window. When she saw me, she stood immediately. "I wasn't sure you'd come." "I almost didn't." She nodded. "I understand." Neither of us sat for several seconds. Finally, I slid into the booth opposite her. A waitress poured coffee without asking. Neither of us touched it. I reached into my purse. I placed Michael's letter on the table. "You said you'd answer my questions." "I will." I leaned forward. "My husband wrote that Anna was alive." Emily swallowed. "Yes." "Who is Anna?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I was." I stared at her. "No." She nodded slowly. My birth name was Anna Gallagher. The words echoed inside my head. Anna Gallagher, my daughter. No, I whispered. That's impossible. Emily reached into a leather folder. She removed a small plastic bracelet. Hospital identification. The faded print was barely visible. Baby girl Gallagher. October 13th, 1983. I picked it up with trembling fingers. The plastic had yellowed with age. It looked old enough to be real, too old to fake. Where did you get this? My adoptive mother kept it. My heart skipped. Adoptive? Yes. I could barely breathe. You were adopted? She nodded. As far as my parents knew, it was legal. I closed my eyes. Michael hadn't written the word adoption. He hadn't written anything except that Anna had lived. Emily quietly continued. My parents loved me. She smiled sadly. David and Linda Brooks were wonderful people. I listened without speaking. They could never have children. They waited years to adopt. They believed an attorney handled everything properly. That attorney was Michael. My stomach turned. My husband, he arranged the paperwork. I shook my head. No. He couldn't. He did. Silence settled between us. Neither of us moved. Finally, I asked the question that terrified me most. How do you know you're my daughter? Emily slowly opened another folder. Inside were several photographs. The first showed Michael sitting across from Emily at a small park. The second showed them walking beside a lake. The third showed Michael crying. Actually crying. I had seen Michael cry only twice. Once when Ryan was born. Once when his own father died. Now there was a third time. I looked up. He met you. For almost 2 years. Without telling me. Emily nodded. He wanted to. When, many times. What stopped him? She looked away. He lost his courage. I felt anger rising inside me. Not loud anger. Cold anger. The kind that settles deep in your chest. He let me visit a grave. He watched me cry. He let me believe our baby died. Emily's eyes filled with tears. I know. I hated him for that. You hated him. For years. Her answer surprised me. I spent almost 10 years trying to find the truth. I didn't know who my birth parents were. After my mother Linda passed away, I found a locked wooden box. It contained my hospital bracelet, the ring, and incomplete adoption papers. I stared at her. The ring. She nodded. Michael gave it to me. When, the first day we met, I frowned. He said it belonged to my mother. He told me to keep it safe until he was brave enough. Brave enough for what? To give it back to you himself? A lump formed in my throat. He couldn't even do that. Emily slowly shook her head. No. He wanted to. But every time we planned to meet you, he canceled. Why? Her expression changed. For the first time since we met, I saw fear. Because someone else always found out. Who? She looked directly into my eyes. Margaret. I felt a chill. My sister-in-law. Emily nodded. She knew every time. How? I don't know. But she warned him repeatedly. Warned him about what? Emily reached into her folder again. This time she removed a folded piece of paper. It wasn't a letter. It was a photocopy. Across the top appeared a nurse's signature. Margaret Doyle. I froze. Recognize the name, I whispered. Yes. Emily pointed toward another signature farther down the page. Transfer authorized by attending nurse, Margaret Doyle. What is this? My original transfer record. I stared at the page. The date matched the hospital record Michael left me. October 14th, 1983. One day after I gave birth. My vision blurred. What does transferred mean? Emily spoke gently. It means someone carried me out of that hospital alive. I couldn't stop shaking. No. She nodded. The nurse who signed those papers? She paused. Was Margaret. The room seemed to spin. I grabbed the edge of the table. The waitress noticed my face. You ladies okay? Emily smiled politely. We're fine. The waitress walked away. I looked back at Emily. My sister-in-law? Yes. The woman who comforted me? Yes. The woman who told me my baby had died? Emily's voice almost disappeared. Yes. Tears streamed down my face. I trusted her. I know. I trusted both of them. Emily reached across the table, then stopped before touching my hand. She seemed unsure whether she had the right. I never came for money. I never came to destroy your family. I only wanted the truth. So did Michael. I laughed bitterly. The truth. He had 43 years. Emily lowered her head. I told him the same thing. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Outside, people came and went. Cars passed. Life continued. Mine had stopped. Finally, I asked one last question. Why now? Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes. Because your husband died before he could tell you. And because I couldn't let you spend one more day believing your daughter was buried in that cemetery. I looked at the hospital bracelet still lying in front of me. Then at the photographs. Then at Emily. For the first time, I really looked at her. The shape of her smile, the curve of her eyebrows, the tiny dimple near her left cheek. Features I had never noticed before. Features that suddenly felt strangely familiar. I wasn't ready to believe she was my daughter, but for the first time, I was afraid she might be telling the truth. I drove home in complete silence. The radio stayed off. My phone buzzed twice. Ryan, I let it ring. For the first time in my life, I didn't know what my family was anymore. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had made another decision. I wasn't going to accuse anyone, not yet. If Emily was lying, I needed proof. If she was telling the truth, I needed even more proof. I walked into the house and found Margaret sitting in my living room. She stood as soon as she saw me. There you are. I frowned. How did you get in? You gave me a key years ago. She smiled. I was worried. I looked at her for several long seconds. Until yesterday, seeing Margaret in my home always made me feel safe. Today, it made me uneasy. She studied my face. You met that woman, didn't you? I didn't answer. Margaret sighed. Susan, listen to me. I placed my purse on the table. What do you know about Emily Brooks? Her expression never changed. Nothing important. Then why did you panic when you saw her yesterday? I didn't. You did. She folded her arms. I was protecting you. From what? From people who prey on grieving widows? I slowly reached into my purse. I removed the hospital bracelet. Margaret's eyes immediately dropped to it. Only for a second, but I saw it. She recognized it. What is that? She asked. You tell me. She shrugged. I've never seen it before. I placed the hospital transfer record beside it. This has your signature. She looked at the paper, then back at me. Where did you get this? You still haven't answered my question. She picked up the document. I signed thousands of hospital forms. I don't remember every patient. This wasn't every patient. This was my daughter. Her face hardened. You need to stop. Stop what I'm digging. I stared at her. Why? Because you're upset. I'm finally asking questions. Susan. Her voice became softer. You nearly died after giving birth. I remember. You lost a great deal of blood. I remember. You were heavily medicated. I remember that too. She leaned closer. Then you also know memories become unreliable. There it was, the first attempt to make me doubt myself. You think I'm imagining this? I think grief makes people vulnerable. I reached into my purse again. This time, I pulled out Michael's letter. Margaret's eyes widened. You found that you knew about it. She immediately realized her mistake. I meant, no, I interrupted her. You knew. Silence. Neither of us moved. Finally, she smiled, a cold smile. Michael should have destroyed it. My heart pounded. So there was something to destroy. Margaret quickly recovered. I meant old legal papers. I shook my head. No. You meant this letter. She turned away. I don't have to explain every sentence. You don't. I nodded. But you just proved you knew it existed. The room became quiet. I had never seen Margaret cornered before. She hated it. Just then, the front door opened. Ryan walked inside carrying grocery bags. Mom! He stopped. Aunt Margaret. The tension was obvious. Ryan looked between us. Everything okay? Margaret smiled immediately. Perfect again. We're fine. Ryan wasn't convinced. He set the groceries down. What's going on? I looked at my son, then at the hospital record. I wanted to tell him everything. Instead, I asked a different question. Ryan, if you discovered your entire life was built on a lie? He frowned. What would you want to know? He laughed nervously. Of course, Margaret answered before he finished. Some lies protect people. Ryan looked confused. What are we talking about? Margaret walked toward him. Nothing. She touched his shoulder. Your mother's overwhelmed. I watched them carefully. Ryan had trusted Margaret since childhood. When Michael worked late, Margaret babysat. She came to birthdays, graduations, Christmas dinners. Ryan adored her. If I accused her now without undeniable proof, he'd never believe me. Margaret knew that. She turned back toward me. I think you should rest. Then she looked directly at the documents. And throw away whatever nonsense that woman gave you. Nonsense? Yes. Without reading it, again, a tiny mistake. She had just admitted she knew the documents came from Emily. I hadn't told her. Neither had Ryan. I quietly folded the papers. I'm keeping them. Margaret's voice sharpened. That's a mistake. No? I think trusting people for 43 years without asking questions was the mistake. She stared at me. For the first time in my life, I saw something dangerous in her eyes. Not anger, fear, real fear. She picked up her purse. I'm leaving. At the door, she stopped. Susan, whatever that woman is telling you, don't destroy your family over it. Then she walked away. Ryan closed the door behind her. He turned toward me. What was that about? I sat down slowly. I met Emily. His shoulders stiffened. You actually met her? Yes. Mom. He sighed. She's manipulating you. How do you know? Because people do that. They invent stories. They chase inheritance. I looked at him. She said she doesn't want money. They all say that. I reached into my purse again. This time, I handed him only the photograph of Michael and Emily. He studied it. Dad? Yes. I don't understand. Neither do I. Ryan looked troubled. Did Dad know her? It appears so. For 2 years. So she says. He handed back the picture. That doesn't prove anything. No, it doesn't. But it proves your father kept secrets. Ryan didn't answer. Instead, he walked toward the window. Finally, he spoke. I don't like this. Neither do I. But I'm not stopping. He turned around. What do you mean? I need proof. What kind? The kind nobody can argue with. He looked confused. I took a deep breath. I'm going to request a DNA test. The room fell silent. Ryan blinked. A DNA test. Yes. With her? Yes. He laughed once, not because it was funny, because he couldn't believe what he had heard. Mom, you can't be serious. I've never been more serious. You don't even know her. I know enough. No. You know what she wants you to know. I stood. I've lived 43 years believing my daughter died. If there's even a 1% chance that wasn't true, I'm finding out. Ryan rubbed his forehead. This is insane. Maybe, but so is a ring that came back from a grave. He didn't answer. I continued. I'm not asking you to believe Emily. I'm asking you to let me learn the truth. He looked exhausted. Finally, he nodded. If you do this, and she's lying, promise me you'll let this end. I promise. He hesitated. And if she's telling the truth? I looked at the family photograph hanging above the fireplace. Michael, Ryan, me. 3 smiling faces. A family that suddenly seemed incomplete. I honestly don't know. That evening, I called the DNA laboratory. The woman on the phone explained the process. Mother-child testing, appointment available in 2 days. I booked it. When I hung up, my phone rang almost immediately. An unknown number. I answered. Susan. Emily's voice. I wasn't sure you'd pick up. I scheduled the test. She became quiet. Finally, she whispered, Thank you. I'm not doing this because I believe you. I know. I'm doing it because I need the truth. I know. There was another pause. Then she said something I didn't expect. I've waited 43 years. I can wait 2 more days. After we hung up, I looked toward Michael's empty chair. For decades, I believed grief was the worst pain a mother could carry. Now I understood something far worse. Hope. Hope was terrifying, because if the test proved Emily was my daughter, everything I believed about my husband, everything I believed about my family, would collapse forever. The next 2 days felt longer than the previous 43 years. Waiting for the DNA test was almost unbearable. I cleaned the house. I organized old photo albums. I even baked Michael's favorite pecan pie. None of it distracted me. Every few minutes, I caught myself looking at the clock, wondering what Emily was doing, wondering if she was as afraid as I was. The morning of the appointment arrived with heavy gray clouds. The laboratory sat inside a modern medical building 20 minutes from my house. I arrived first. I almost drove away twice before pulling into the parking space. Then Emily's car appeared. She stepped out carrying nothing except her purse. When she saw me, she offered a small smile. Not confident, not hopeful, just polite. Good morning. I nodded. Morning. Neither of us mentioned the test. Inside, the receptionist handed us several forms. One question caught my attention. Reason for testing. Without thinking, I wrote family verification. The technician collected our identification. Then, she led us into separate rooms. The procedure itself lasted less than 5 minutes. A simple swab inside my cheek. Another from Emily. 43 years of questions reduced to 2 cotton swabs. When we finished, the technician smiled. Results should be ready in about a week. A week! It sounded impossible. Outside the building, Emily stopped beside her car. You don't have to leave. I looked at her. I know. If you have time, would you like some coffee? For a moment, I almost refused. Then I remembered something. The DNA results would tell me whether Emily was my daughter. But they wouldn't tell me how she had found Michael, or what happened after that. I have time. We drove to a quiet coffee shop nearby. This time, neither of us seemed as nervous as before. Perhaps because there was nothing left to hide. We ordered coffee. Emily chose tea instead. When we sat down, she surprised me. I've been trying to decide where to begin. Begin with the truth. I will. She folded her hands. My parents loved me. I need you to know that first. I never lacked love. I listened carefully. My father David owned a hardware store. My mother Linda taught 3rd grade. They never treated me differently. They celebrated every birthday. They attended every school play. They were wonderful. A smile crossed her face. I had a happy childhood. For the first time, I felt something unexpected, relief. If Emily truly was my daughter, at least she hadn't grown up unloved. She continued. I didn't know I was adopted until I was 16. I looked up. 16? She nodded. My mother became sick. She thought she might die, so she told me. She cried the entire conversation. She kept saying, "We chose you." Emily smiled faintly. I believed that was the whole story. What changed? My mother died 3 years ago. She stared into her tea. While cleaning the attic, I found a wooden box. The key was taped underneath one of her sewing drawers. Inside that box, she said, were 4 things: the hospital bracelet, the opal ring, a partial adoption file, and an old bank receipt. The paperwork was incomplete. Several pages had been removed, but one signature remained. She reached into her purse. She handed me a photocopy. There it was, Margaret Doyle, again. I searched her name online. I learned she had worked at Richmond Memorial Hospital. So I drove there. The hospital told me the records had been archived. They couldn't release anything. So I kept searching. Eventually I found Michael. My heart tightened. How? He was still practicing law. I scheduled a consultation. What did you tell him? The truth. I showed him the bracelet. The ring. The adoption papers? Emily looked down. He turned white. I could almost picture it. Michael sitting behind his polished desk, looking at evidence from a life he had buried. What happened then? He asked me to close the office door. He locked it. And then, she paused. He cried. Not quiet tears, not polite tears. He broke down. She took a slow breath. I'd never seen a grown man cry like that. He kept saying, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He admitted he was my biological father. She nodded, not immediately. First, he asked for a DNA test. I frowned. He didn't believe you. He wanted proof. I agreed. The results came back, 99.9%. Michael Gallagher was her biological father. When he saw the report, Emily whispered. He collapsed into his chair. I swallowed hard. He told you everything. No, not everything. He said only one sentence. "Your mother never gave you away." Tears filled my eyes. Those words mattered, more than almost anything else, because deep inside one fear had haunted me. What if I had signed something while unconscious? What if I had somehow forgotten? Emily continued. "He said you never knew. He said you believed I died. And he said he was the reason." I covered my face. "Michael," why? Emily gently continued. I asked him why. He never answered directly. He only said, "I thought I was protecting her." The same excuse. Silence. Protection. The words felt emptier every time I heard them. Emily reached into her purse again. "This is why I wanted you to meet me." She placed her phone on the table. I saved his last voicemail. She pressed play. Michael's familiar voice filled the quiet caf. Older, weaker, filled with regret. "Emily, I don't know how much longer I have. I've delayed this too long. I'm going to tell Susan everything. No more lies. No more excuses. I've already spoken with my attorney. If anything happens to me, give Susan the ring. She deserves the truth." His breathing sounded heavy. Then his voice dropped almost to a whisper. "Margaret knows we've been meeting. She says I'll destroy the family. But I already destroyed it years ago. I just never admitted it." The recording ended. I couldn't speak. That single message carried more honesty than Michael had given me in decades. He finally chose the truth. Emily nodded sadly. "Too late." "Yes." She wrapped both hands around her tea. "There was one more thing." "What?" "He told me never to hate you." I looked up. He said, "Your mother has been grieving for someone who was alive. She suffered because of my choices. If she ever learns the truth, don't let her blame herself." I closed my eyes. Fresh tears rolled down my face. For years, I believed Michael mourned beside me. Now I realized he had watched me suffer every Mother's Day, knowing my child was alive somewhere. No apology could erase that. Yet hearing his voice, hearing his regret, made my anger more complicated. He wasn't a monster. He was a coward. Sometimes, cowardice destroys lives just as completely. As we prepared to leave, Emily reached into her purse one last time. She removed an old folded receipt. "The police never investigated this." "I think they should have." I unfolded it. A cashier's receipt from October 1983. A payment. $75,000. The account name wasn't Michael Gallagher. It wasn't David Brooks. It wasn't a hospital. It was something else. Doyle Family Services. Margaret's name. My hands began to shake again. This wasn't just a secret anymore. It looked like money had changed hands. And for the first time, I began to wonder whether my daughter had been stolen or sold. The DNA results arrived 6 days later. Not 7. 6. I almost didn't answer the phone when the laboratory called. My hand hovered over the screen. For one brief second, I considered letting it ring. As long as I didn't answer, my life could remain suspended between two possibilities. The phone stopped. A second later, it rang again. This time, I answered. "Mrs. Gallagher?" "Yes." "This is Jennifer from Commonwealth DNA Laboratory." My throat tightened. "Your results are ready." I couldn't speak. "Would you prefer to receive them through our secure online portal, or would you like to come into the office?" "I'll come." The drive felt endless. Every red light seemed longer than usual. Every mile felt heavy. I parked outside the laboratory and sat in my car for nearly 5 minutes. I kept thinking about one question. If Emily wasn't my daughter, Could I somehow feel relieved? Or had I already begun hoping she was inside? The receptionist handed me a sealed envelope. No dramatic speech, no explanation, just a quiet smile. I carried it to my car before opening it. My fingers trembled so badly that I tore the edge unevenly. The report contained only a few pages. Most of it was scientific language. Then I found the conclusion. Probability of maternity, 99.9998%. Relationship confirmed. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. The paper slipped onto my lap. 43 years. 43 years believing my daughter had died. She hadn't. She had grown up. She had laughed, gone to school, celebrated birthdays, fallen in love, built a career, all while I knelt beside an empty grave. I covered my mouth as tears poured down my face. They weren't tears of joy, not entirely. They were 43 years of grief changing shape all at once. I reached for my phone. Emily's number sat at the top of my recent calls. I stared at it, then I pressed it. She answered immediately. Susan. My voice broke. The results came. Silence. I know. You know, they called me too. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I whispered, It's true. I heard her crying, softly. I've imagined this moment my entire life. I closed my eyes. So have I. We agreed to meet at a small park halfway between our homes, the same park where Michael had met her. I arrived first. Children played on swings. A young father pushed his daughter on a slide. I couldn't stop watching them. That should have been me. Emily walked toward me carrying 2 cups of coffee. She smiled uncertainly. I didn't know if you'd still want coffee. I laughed through my tears. I honestly don't know what I want. We sat on a bench beneath a large oak tree. Neither of us touched our drinks. I looked at her. Really looked. The sunlight caught her face differently than before. I noticed tiny details. The shape of her chin. The way she tucked loose hair behind one ear. The tiny wrinkle beside her left eye when she smiled. Suddenly, I remembered an old photograph of myself at 25. I used to smile exactly the same way. Without realizing it, I reached toward her face. Then, I stopped. I'm sorry. Emily gently took my hand before I could pull it away. You don't have to apologize. Our hands remained together. Awkward, strange, natural, all at once. I don't know how to do this, I admitted. I don't either. I've never met my own daughter before. She smiled sadly. And I've never met my birth mother. We both laughed quietly. It felt ridiculous and heartbreaking. I don't expect you to call me Mom. I said it before she could. You don't owe me that. You don't owe me anything. Emily shook her head. I've never blamed you. Michael told me everything. He told me you never knew. Fresh tears filled my eyes. I should have protected you. She squeezed my hand. You couldn't. You didn't even know I needed protecting. Those words eased something inside me. Not much, but enough to breathe again. After a long silence, Emily reached into her purse. I brought something. She handed me a small notebook. What is this? My adoptive mother kept notes. I opened it carefully. The first page was dated October 1983. Linda Brooks had written about bringing home a baby girl, about sleepless nights, about first smiles, about first steps. Every page overflowed with love. I cried as I read. Emily watched me quietly. I'm glad she loved you. I am too. I've never wanted to replace her. You don't have to. She smiled. I've always hoped I could love both mothers. The word mothers echoed inside me. Not one, two. Instead of jealousy, I felt gratitude. Someone had kissed my daughter goodnight when I couldn't. Someone had comforted her after nightmares. Someone had cheered at graduations. It should have been me, but at least it had been someone who loved her. Emily suddenly grew serious. I need to show you one more thing. She handed me another document. It was the financial receipt again. Only this time, there were additional pages. Bank statements, highlighted transactions. The $75,000, I asked. Yes. I hired a private investigator after Michael died. My heart skipped. What did he find? The money didn't go to my parents. I frowned. They never paid for me. The payment went into an account controlled by Margaret. I stared at the statement. A week later, nearly the entire amount disappeared. Several withdrawals, several transfers. One payment caught my eye. Gallagher and Pierce Law Offices, Michael's old law firm. I looked up sharply. Michael received some of it. Emily nodded. According to the investigator, the money was used to pay off debts. My stomach turned. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to defend Michael. Instead, I remembered his letter. There is no excuse for what I did. He hadn't denied his guilt. He had confessed it. The question was no longer whether he participated. The question was why. Just then, my phone rang. Ryan. I hesitated. You should answer, Emily said softly. I picked up. Hi, Ryan. Mom. His voice sounded tense. I stopped by your house. You weren't there. I'm out. With her? I closed my eyes. Yes. He sighed heavily. So the test came back. Yes. There was a long silence. Finally, he asked, What did it say? I looked at Emily. She stared at the ground. Then I answered. She's my daughter. Ryan didn't speak. For several seconds, I thought the call had disconnected. Finally, I heard him whisper, No. It's true. No. My father would never... His voice cracked. He wouldn't do this. I wish you were right. Another silence. Then the line went dead. Emily looked worried. Is he okay? I don't know. Neither did I. Because Ryan wasn't only losing the father he admired. He was discovering he had a sister he never knew existed. And if that wasn't enough, the bank records suggested something even darker. Maybe my daughter hadn't simply been given away. Maybe someone had made money from taking her. And every new piece of evidence pointed toward the same woman, Margaret Doyle. That night, I couldn't stop staring at the bank statement. $75,000. The number haunted me, not because it was large, because it had a date. October 1983. The same week my daughter disappeared. If that money truly had anything to do with Anna, I needed facts, not assumptions. The next morning, Emily called. I've been thinking. So have I. We need someone who was actually there. You mean the hospital? Yes. The hospital had closed nearly 20 years earlier. Most of its records had been moved to storage. Most of its staff had retired. Finding someone after 4 decades seemed impossible. Still, we tried. Emily contacted the private investigator again. By late afternoon, he returned our call. I found someone. His voice sounded excited. Retired maternity nurse. Name? Ruth Coleman. She's 81. And she's willing to talk. The following morning, Emily and I drove to a quiet retirement community outside Richmond. Ruth lived in a small brick house with flower beds covering the front yard. She answered the door herself. Tiny, gray-haired, sharp eyes. She studied us for several seconds. You must be Susan. I nodded. And Emily. Ruth stepped aside. "I've been expecting you." Her living room walls were covered with old family photographs. She offered us tea before sitting across from us. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Ruth sighed. I wondered if this day would ever come. My heart began pounding. "You remember me?" "I remember every mother who almost died." The words struck hard. "You lost a frightening amount of blood." She looked at me gently. "I honestly wasn't sure you'd survive." I swallowed. "I survived." "Yes." She smiled sadly, but something else didn't. "What do you mean?" "The truth." Silence filled the room. Ruth folded her hands. "Your daughter was healthy." I closed my eyes, even though I already knew. Hearing it from someone who had been there felt different. Perfect lungs. Strong heartbeat. Good weight. She cried louder than almost every baby born that week. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I whispered, "I never heard her cry." Ruth reached over and touched my hand. "I'm sorry." "I wanted you to." My voice shook. "What happened?" Ruth looked toward the window. "As nurses, we weren't supposed to ask questions. But everyone noticed. Noticed what Margaret—" My breathing stopped. "She wasn't assigned to your room. Yet she kept coming. She argued with doctors. She carried paperwork no one else saw." Emily leaned forward. "Did she take me?" Ruth nodded slowly. "I saw her." "She carried you out herself." The room became silent. I couldn't believe I was hearing the story from an eyewitness. "Where did she take the baby?" "I don't know. She said there had been a confidential transfer." "Did anyone question it?" "A few people did. But your husband was an attorney. He produced legal documents. And Margaret was respected. So everyone accepted it." I asked the question that had haunted me for days. "Was my baby ever declared dead?" Ruth answered immediately. "No." The certainty in her voice left no room for doubt. "Never." Emily wiped tears from her face. "What about the funeral?" Ruth looked confused. "What funeral?" "The baby's funeral." "There wasn't one." I stared at her. "There had to be." "I attended it." Ruth slowly shook her head. "I mean, there was never a baby's body released from the hospital." I felt dizzy. If no body left the hospital, then what exactly had we buried? After leaving Ruth's house, Emily and I drove directly to the county records office. I wanted proof. Official proof. Not memories. The clerk searched old microfilm archives. After nearly an hour, she returned, carrying several copies. One document caught my attention immediately. Burial permit. Or rather, the lack of one. "There isn't one." The clerk looked puzzled. "For infant remains, there should always be a burial permit." "There isn't any record under Anna Gallagher." I looked at Emily. She looked back at me. Another piece fit. Then the clerk handed us funeral records. The service had been paid for. The cemetery plot existed. The tiny casket existed. But one line made my blood run cold. Contents verified, none required. "What does that mean?" I asked. The clerk frowned. "It usually means there were no human remains." Emily slowly whispered, "An empty casket." I sat down because my knees suddenly felt weak. 43 years. 43 years of flowers. 43 years of birthdays. 43 years talking to dirt. The grave had never contained my daughter. We left the records office in complete silence. But we weren't finished. The investigator had one more appointment waiting for us. An accountant. He specialized in historical financial records. His office overlooked downtown Richmond. Stacks of files covered every desk. He greeted us politely. I traced the payment. I immediately asked, "Where did the money go?" He spread several documents across the table. The $75,000 entered Margaret Doyle's account. I know. But it didn't stay there. He pointed to another page. Within 6 days, $40,000 was transferred to Gallagher and Pierce. My husband's law office. Yes, he pointed again. The remaining money paid several personal debts. I looked closely. Mortgage, business loan, credit obligations. Michael's financial problems from the early 80s. Emily looked stunned. So, my adoption solved his debts. The accountant nodded slowly. According to these records, yes. I couldn't speak. Every excuse Michael had made in his letter suddenly felt smaller. Not because he hadn't loved me. I believed he had. But somewhere between love and fear, he had chosen money too. The investigator then placed one final document on the table. I almost forgot. It was a photocopy, an old legal form, relinquishment of parental rights. I stared at the signature. Michael Gallagher. Signed. Date, October 14th, 1983. The day after I gave birth. My vision blurred. I never signed anything. The investigator nodded. There is only one signature. His, I whispered. He gave away our daughter. Emily quietly reached for my hand. I didn't pull away. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, I looked at the investigator. Can this document be challenged? Absolutely. If your consent was never obtained, it was legally defective. Another question struck me. Where is my signature? He looked directly at me. There isn't one. The drive home felt endless. As we neared my neighborhood, Emily finally spoke. I've been thinking about Michael. I looked at her. I hate what he did. So do I. But, she hesitated. I don't think he ever stopped regretting it. I remembered his voicemail, his tears, his letters, his apology. Then I remembered something else. He still signed the paper. Regret didn't erase that. Love didn't erase that. Nothing did. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed Ryan's truck parked outside. He was waiting, leaning against the porch railing. The moment he saw us arrive together, he straightened. His face looked exhausted. He walked toward my car. His eyes moved from me to Emily, then back again. I think, he said quietly, we need to talk. The expression on his face told me this conversation was about to change everything once again. Ryan stood on my porch with his hands shoved into his pockets. He looked like he hadn't slept. Neither had I. Emily stopped a few feet behind me. I'll wait in the car, she said quietly. Ryan looked at her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, he nodded. Thank you. Emily returned to her car. I unlocked the front door. Ryan followed me inside. The house felt strangely different now. For decades, it had been the place where Michael's voice filled every room. Now, every room felt like evidence. Ryan remained standing. I've been thinking all night. So have I. He rubbed his face. I wanted to believe Dad couldn't have done this. I know. I still do. His voice cracked. But he looked at me. I found something. My heart began racing. What? I couldn't sleep. So I went to Dad's office. I stared at him. I wasn't looking for proof. I just needed to feel close to him. He reached into his jacket. Then he placed a small brass key on the table. I found this taped underneath his desk. I recognized it immediately. A bank key. Michael had rented a safe deposit box years ago. At least I thought he had closed it after retirement. Apparently he hadn't. I didn't know he still had it. Ryan shook his head. Neither did I. He looked at me carefully. I thought maybe we should open it together. An hour later, we walked into First Commonwealth Bank. Emily stayed outside. She insisted this belonged to me and Ryan. The bank manager led us into the vault. A long metal drawer slid from the wall. Inside sat several thick envelopes, a leather journal, and a stack of birthday cards tied together with blue ribbon. Ryan picked one up. The front read, "Happy 5th birthday, Anna." His hands froze. There are more. We counted them. 1, 5, 10, 20, 43. One birthday card for every year my daughter had been alive. I could barely see through my tears. Ryan carefully untied the ribbon. Inside each envelope was a handwritten letter. Every single one began the same way. Dear Anna, I opened the first. My beautiful little girl. Today you are 5 years old. I wonder whether you like birthday cake. I wonder whether your mother braided your hair this morning. I wonder if you laugh the way Susan does. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the page. Michael had written to her every year, but he never mailed them. Ryan opened another. Anna at 12, another. Anna at 18, another. Anna at 30. Each letter grew heavier, filled with regret, filled with love, filled with cowardice. I watched your mother place flowers at your grave again today. I wanted to tell her the truth. I couldn't. Ryan lowered the letter. His eyes filled with tears. I don't understand. He loved her. He loved you. So why didn't he tell us? I had asked myself the same question 1,000 times. I think he believed every year that next year would be easier. Ryan laughed bitterly. It never was. No. It never was. Beneath the letters sat another envelope, marked Estate Revision. Inside was a copy of Michael's newest will. 3 equal shares. 1 for me, 1 for Ryan, 1 for Emily Brooks. Ryan read it twice. He already changed everything. He knew. Yes. He accepted she was his daughter. Yes. Ryan sat heavily in the chair. He planned this before he died. He did. The next folder surprised both of us. Bank transfers, canceled checks, payment receipts. Over several years, Michael had quietly repaid the entire $75,000. With interest, anonymous deposits, charitable transfers. Every dollar had eventually left his accounts. Ryan looked confused. What does this mean? I stared at the paperwork. It means guilt. He couldn't undo what he did. But he tried to erase the money. Ryan nodded slowly. He couldn't buy forgiveness. No. He knew that. At the very bottom of the safe rested one final folder. Its label immediately caught my attention. Margaret. Original hospital documents. My heart raced. This is it. The originals. I reached for the folder. It felt unusually light. Too light. I opened it. Empty. Nothing. Not one page. Ryan frowned. That's impossible. The folder contained only a single yellow sticky note. Gone. I stared at the word. Gone. Who had taken them? When then another thought hit me. The funeral reception, Michael's office, the security cameras. I looked at Ryan. We have cameras. He immediately understood. Within an hour, we were sitting in Michael's office reviewing recordings from the day of the funeral. The footage showed relatives entering and leaving, neighbors bringing food. church friends stopping by. Then, Margaret. She walked into the office alone. She looked around carefully. She opened the desk drawer. Then another. Finally, she removed a folder. She slipped it beneath her coat. She stayed less than 2 minutes. Then she left. Ryan stared at the screen. No. I whispered, pause it. He froze the image. The folder under Margaret's coat looked exactly like the empty folder from the safe. Ryan leaned back slowly. My God. He looked sick. Aunt Margaret stole them. I nodded, after Michael died. And before anyone knew, silence settled over the room. Finally, Ryan spoke. I owe Emily an apology. The word surprised me. I treated her like a criminal. I accused her. I defended people who lied. His voice broke. I defended Dad. I walked around the desk and hugged my son. He hadn't cried at the funeral. He cried now. I miss him. I know. I hate him. I know. I still love him. So do I. Those 3 feelings somehow existed together. Love, grief, betrayal. None canceled the others. When Ryan finally pulled away, he wiped his eyes. What do we do now? Before I could answer, the front doorbell rang. Emily. She had been waiting outside the entire time. Ryan looked at me. I'll do it. He walked to the front door. I stayed behind. I could hear every word. Emily smiled nervously. I didn't want to interrupt. Ryan looked at her quietly. Then he took one slow step forward. I'm sorry. Emily looked surprised. For what? For everything. I called you a liar. I treated you like you were trying to steal from us. His voice trembled. But you're not stealing anything. He swallowed hard. You already lost everything. Emily's eyes filled with tears. So did you. Ryan nodded. I guess we both did. For the first time, they hugged. Not as strangers, not yet as siblings, but as 2 people grieving the same man for completely different reasons. Later that evening, after Emily left, Ryan stood beside me in the kitchen. He looked toward the family photographs on the wall. They're wrong. What do you mean? There should have been 4 of us. I looked at the pictures. Michael, me, Ryan. Every smiling photograph suddenly felt incomplete. Ryan turned toward me. I'll stand beside you. No matter what happens. If Margaret goes to court, if the family turns against us, if Dad's reputation is destroyed, I'm done protecting lies. I hugged him tightly. For the first time since Michael's funeral, I felt something stronger than grief. We weren't alone anymore, but somewhere across town. Margaret still had the missing hospital records, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. She wasn't going to surrender them without a fight. The next morning, Emily returned to my house carrying a small digital recorder. Ryan sat beside me at the kitchen table. None of us had touched the coffee I had poured. Emily placed the recorder between us. There are things Michael told me that I haven't shared yet. Ryan's shoulders tightened. What things? Emily looked at me first. I didn't want to tell you before the DNA results. Why? Because once you hear this, you won't be able to remember him the same way. I almost laughed. That had already happened. Tell us. Emily took a slow breath. The first time Michael admitted what happened, we were sitting in his car. He said he couldn't say it inside his office. He was afraid Margaret might have someone watching him. Ryan frowned. Watching him? Michael believed she monitored his calls and knew when we met. I remembered his final voicemail. Margaret knows we've been meeting. Emily continued. In 1983, Michael's law firm was collapsing. His partner had made terrible investments. They owed money to clients. They were weeks away from losing everything. I looked at the repayment records we had found. So, Margaret offered him a solution? Emily nodded. She knew David and Linda Brooks wanted a baby. She also knew they had money. Ryan's face hardened. She arranged the adoption? Yes. She told Michael the Brooks family would provide a better life. She said Susan was weak after the hemorrhage. She said another pregnancy would be possible. My hands curled into fists beneath the table. I wasn't weak. Emily looked at me. I know. But Michael was frightened. Frightened of losing the firm. Frightened you might die. Frightened of scandal. I whispered, so he gave her permission. Emily's answer was quiet. Yes. The word cut deeper than anything else. Michael hadn't been tricked. He hadn't discovered the truth afterward. He had chosen it. Ryan stood suddenly. I need air. He walked to the back door, then stopped. Did Dad take the money? Emily didn't look away. Part of it paid his firm's debts. Ryan gripped the doorframe. So he sold his daughter? No. I said it automatically. Then I stopped. What else could it be called? Emily spoke carefully. Michael never used that word. Of course he didn't. Ryan turned around. People like Dad never use the ugliest word. They hide behind cleaner ones. Private placement, protection, transfer, all soft words for something cruel. Emily pressed her fingers together. He said Margaret convinced him it would happen only once. He believed the Brooks family would love me. They did. But that doesn't excuse him. No, I said. It doesn't. Ryan returned to the table. His eyes were red. Why the funeral? Emily looked toward me. Because Susan woke up asking for her baby. I remembered that morning. The empty bassinet. Michael's wet eyes. Margaret's arms around me. Michael panicked. Emily continued. He told Margaret he couldn't keep lying. She said the only way to make the story permanent was to give you something to mourn. My stomach turned. The casket. Yes. The grave. Yes. And the ring. Emily looked down at her hands. Michael took it from your jewelry box. I felt cold. He told me he had buried it. He almost did. I stared at her. What does that mean? Emily reached into her purse. She removed a photograph I had not seen before. It showed a newborn wrapped in a pale blanket. Only part of the baby's face was visible. Pinned near the blanket was my opal ring. My breath caught. Is that? Emily nodded. Me. I touched the edge of the photograph. Michael had placed the ring beside her before she was taken away. He told me it was the only thing he could give me that came from you. Tears filled my eyes. Then why did you have it? Linda kept it with my adoption papers. She believed it came from my birth mother. I shook my head. It did. Just not with my consent. Michael had stolen my ring, then used it as proof of love. The contradiction made me sick. Emily continued. Years later, when you asked where the ring was, he told you it was in the grave. One lie needed another. And another. And another. The room fell silent. I looked at Michael's chair. He had sat there every morning for decades, reading the newspaper, drinking coffee, discussing ordinary things. All while the truth lived inside him. Why did he contact you after you found him? I asked. He said seeing the ring again broke something open. He couldn't pretend anymore. Ryan asked, did he plan to tell us? Yes. Several times? When? The first Christmas after we met. Then your wedding anniversary. Then Susan's birthday. Each time he backed out. Why, Margaret. Emily opened a folder and removed printed messages. Some were from Michael. Some were from Margaret. One message from Margaret read, "If Susan learns the truth, she will lose everything at once: her husband, her family, and her sanity." Is that what you want? Another said, "You confess, and I will make certain Ryan knows his father traded one child to save a career." Ryan read the sentence twice. His face went pale. She used me. Yes, Emily said. She knew Michael feared losing you. I looked at my son. He should have feared losing the truth. Ryan nodded. He should have feared what he had already become. Emily reached for the recorder. 3 days before he died, he called me. She pressed play. Michael's voice filled the kitchen. I've made the appointment. My attorney will record everything. I will name Margaret. I will name myself. I won't ask for forgiveness. I only want Susan to hear the truth from me. There was a pause. Then his voice softened. Our anniversary is Friday. I'm going to tell her that morning. My hand flew to my mouth. Our 44th anniversary. Michael had died on Tuesday, 3 days before the confession. I remembered finding him collapsed beside the kitchen counter. His coffee mug shattered on the floor. The doctor called it a sudden heart attack. Natural. Unexpected. Final. For days I had mourned the future we lost. Now I realized he had been preparing to destroy the past. The recording continued. If I fail again, my attorney has instructions. I signed a sworn statement. Emily gives Susan the ring. She'll understand why it matters. The audio ended. Ryan looked at me. He recorded a confession. Yes. Emily nodded. With his estate attorney. Who? Jonathan Reed. I knew the name. Jonathan had worked with Michael for more than 20 years. Before I could say anything, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mrs. Gallagher? Yes, this is Jonathan Reed. All three of us froze. His voice was calm but urgent. I need you to come to my office today. Why, Margaret Doyle filed an emergency petition this morning. My heart sank. What petition? She's challenging Michael's revised trust. Ryan leaned closer, listening. Jonathan continued. She claims Emily Brooks manipulated your husband while he was mentally impaired. That's a lie. I know. Can she succeed? She intends to try. I looked at Emily. Her face remained still, but her hands trembled. Jonathan lowered his voice. There's something else. What? Michael left a sealed, sworn statement. I was instructed to release it only if the trust was challenged or if the family secret became public. My heart pounded. Can we hear it? Yes. But understand this, Susan. Once that recording is played, Michael's reputation will not survive it. I looked at the photograph of my newborn daughter, at the ring beside her blanket, at Ryan, whose father had become a stranger, then at Emily, who had spent 43 years outside our family. His reputation survived long enough, I said. The truth didn't. Jonathan became silent. Then he answered, Come at 2. When the call ended, I looked at my children. Not one child. 2. We're going together. Ryan nodded. Emily hesitated. You don't have to protect me. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm not protecting you. I'm standing beside you. For the first time, she squeezed my hand back without uncertainty. At 2 o'clock, we would hear Michael's final confession. And somewhere across Richmond, Margaret was preparing to make sure the truth died with him. At exactly 2 o'clock, Ryan, Emily, and I walked into Jonathan Reed's office. Jonathan had known Michael for more than 20 years. He looked older than I remembered. Not because of age, because of disappointment. He shook each of our hands without smiling. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances." "So am I," I answered. He led us into a private conference room. A single folder rested on the polished table. Beside it sat a digital recorder. Jonathan looked at Emily. "I'm glad you're here." Then he looked at Ryan. "You should know this recording won't be easy." Ryan nodded. "I've stopped expecting easy." Jonathan didn't press the play button immediately. Instead, he opened another folder. "I received something this morning." "What is it?" "A copy of Margaret Doyle's petition." He slid the papers across the table. Ryan read the first page aloud. "Emily Brooks intentionally manipulated a dying man for financial gain." He stopped. His jaw tightened. "This is disgusting." Jonathan nodded. "Margaret also claims Michael lacked mental capacity when he signed the revised trust." Emily looked stunned. "She wants to erase me." "Yes," Jonathan answered. "And if successful, she'll invalidate every change Michael made." I leaned forward. "Can she—" "Not if we prove Michael was competent. And not if the recording says what I believe it says." He finally picked up the recorder. "This statement was recorded 5 days before Michael died. He signed an affidavit immediately afterward. No one has heard it. Not even me." He pressed play. Michael's voice filled the room. Calm, clear, stronger than in the voicemail Emily had played. "My name is Michael Gallagher. I am making this statement voluntarily. I understand it may be used after my death." I closed my eyes. Hearing his voice again hurt more than I expected. "I have lied to my wife Susan for 43 years. There is no excuse. My daughter was born healthy. She did not die." I heard Emily quietly crying beside me. Michael continued. "My wife never agreed to surrender our child. She never signed adoption papers. She never knew." I looked at Jonathan. He simply listened. Michael took a deep breath. "My sister, Margaret Doyle, forged Susan's signature." Ryan looked up sharply, arranged the transfer, and organized the false funeral. Silence filled the room. Michael didn't stop. "I accepted responsibility. I signed the relinquishment papers. I believed I was protecting my wife. I was wrong. I believed I was saving my career. I was selfish." Every sentence felt like another weight placed on my heart. Not because I doubted him, because I had waited 43 years to hear those words. They buried an empty casket. I told Susan our daughter had died. I watched her mourn every year. I allowed that pain to continue. I failed my wife. I failed both of my children. Ryan lowered his head. His shoulders trembled. Michael's voice softened. "If Susan ever hears this, please understand. I loved you, but love without courage becomes another form of betrayal." Tears rolled freely down my face. Then came the final sentence. "I ask for no forgiveness. I only ask that the truth finally belong to my family." The recording ended. No one moved. Jonathan quietly switched off the recorder. Ryan stood up and walked toward the window. His back faced us. He wiped his eyes. Finally, he whispered, "He admitted everything." Jonathan nodded. "He did." A knock interrupted the silence. Jonathan's assistant stepped inside. "Mr. Reed, Margaret Doyle is here." Every muscle in my body tightened. She came. Jonathan looked surprised. Apparently, she wants to discuss the estate. Before anyone could answer, Margaret walked into the conference room without waiting. She stopped the moment she saw Emily. Then Ryan. Then me. What is she doing here? I stood slowly. You tell me. Margaret looked toward Jonathan. I asked for a private meeting. Jonathan remained calm. This concerns all beneficiaries. There are only 2 beneficiaries, Margaret snapped. Ryan spoke before I could. No. There are 3. Margaret stared at him. You believe her? I believe evidence? Her expression hardened. She turned toward me. Susan, you've let this woman poison your mind. I didn't answer. Instead, I asked one question. Why did you forge my signature? Her face changed, only for a second. Then she laughed. I don't know what you're talking about. Jonathan calmly picked up the recorder. Michael knew exactly what he was talking about. Margaret's smile disappeared. You played it. Yes. She looked at me again. You actually believe a dying man's guilt? I took one slow step closer. No. I believe the hospital records. I believe the nurse. I believe the cemetery records. I believe the bank statements. And now, I believe my husband. Margaret looked around the room. She realized no one stood beside her, not even Ryan. Her voice softened. I did what had to be done. Ryan stared at her. What? She looked at him. Your father was desperate. Your mother nearly died. The Brooks family wanted a child. It solved everyone's problems. Emily spoke quietly. Except ours. Margaret ignored her. I protected this family. I couldn't stay silent any longer. You stole my child. I gave her a better life. You stole 43 years. I saved your marriage. You destroyed it. The room fell silent. Jonathan finally spoke. Mrs. Doyle, I strongly advise you not to continue. She looked at him angrily. You work for me now. Jonathan shook his head. I worked for Michael. And now I represent his estate. He handed her another document. There's something else you should know. She glanced at it. What is this, whoa? The court hearing? She frowned. What hearing? Jonathan answered calmly. The probate court accepted your petition. The judge scheduled a hearing. Next Tuesday. Margaret smiled. Good. I'll prove Emily manipulated my brother. Jonathan didn't smile back. And we'll present Michael's sworn confession. Her face lost all color. For the first time, Margaret looked frightened. Real fear? She quickly folded the notice, then looked directly at me. You still have time. To do what? Stop this! You'll destroy Michael's memory. I looked into her eyes. No, I'll stop protecting his lie. Margaret turned and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she looked at Emily one final time. You'll never be a Gallagher. Emily didn't answer. Ryan did. She already is. Margaret froze. Then without another word, she left. The room remained silent long after the door closed. Jonathan finally looked at us. She's scared. I nodded. Good. Because for 43 years, fear belonged to us. Next week, it would finally belong to Margaret. The courthouse was already crowded when we arrived. I had spent years walking into libraries, churches, and schools with confidence. That morning, my knees felt weak. Ryan walked on my right. Emily walked on my left. Without saying a word, They matched my pace. For the first time in 43 years, I wasn't facing the truth alone. Inside the courtroom, Margaret sat beside her attorney. She wore a navy blue suit. Her hair was perfectly styled. If someone had walked in without knowing the story, they would have assumed she was the respectable woman protecting her family. She looked at me only once. There was no warmth in her eyes. Only calculation. Jonathan Reed leaned toward us. "Remember?" he whispered. "Stay calm. Let the evidence speak." The judge entered. Everyone stood. The hearing began. Margaret's attorney wasted no time. "Your Honor, my client believes the decedent was manipulated during the final months of his life." He pointed toward Emily. "This woman appeared only after Mr. Gallagher became elderly and vulnerable. She isolated him. She persuaded him to alter his estate. She now claims to be his daughter, despite arriving with conveniently produced documents decades after the alleged events. Every sentence was carefully prepared. Every sentence painted Emily as a predator." I watched Emily lower her eyes. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. The attorney continued. "We also question Mrs. Susan Gallagher's emotional condition." I felt Ryan tense beside me. After the recent death of her husband, she has experienced profound grief. She is vulnerable to suggestion. There it was again, the same tactic Margaret had used weeks earlier. If they couldn't erase the evidence, they would erase me. Jonathan stood. "Your Honor, before presenting our evidence, my client wishes to address one issue." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Jonathan looked at Emily. She slowly stood. Every eye in the courtroom turned toward her. She looked nervous, but when she spoke, her voice remained steady. "I don't want Michael Gallagher's money." The room became silent. If inheriting anything would make people believe I came here for wealth, I will sign away every dollar today. Even Margaret looked surprised. Emily continued. "I didn't spend 10 years searching for my family because of an inheritance. I came because I wanted my mother to know she didn't lose her daughter. I already had parents who loved me. I only wanted the truth." No one spoke. The judge quietly nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Brooks." Jonathan rose again. "The estate appreciates that statement." He placed a flash drive on the evidence table. "Your Honor, the deceased anticipated this exact challenge. I ask permission to play his sworn statement." Margaret's attorney immediately objected. "We haven't verified authenticity." Jonathan calmly lifted another folder. "It was recorded in my office. I personally witnessed Mr. Gallagher signing the affidavit. The recording is legally authenticated." The judge considered the documents, then nodded. "Play it." The courtroom speakers came alive. Michael's voice filled the room. "My name is Michael Gallagher." Several people shifted in their seats. No one expected a dead man to become the most important witness. He spoke clearly. "My wife never consented. I repeat, Susan Gallagher never agreed to surrender our daughter." I closed my eyes. Hearing those words in public felt different. The burden I had carried for decades no longer belonged only to me. Michael continued. "My sister Margaret Doyle forged Susan's signature." Gasps spread across the courtroom. Margaret didn't move, but I noticed her hands gripping the table. "My daughter was removed from Richmond Memorial Hospital alive. There was never a death certificate based on fact. There was never a body. There was never a legitimate funeral." Another wave of whispers moved through the courtroom. Ryan stared straight ahead. His jaw remained clenched. Michael continued. I knowingly participated. I signed documents that should never have been signed. I accepted money that should never have been accepted. I have no defense. The silence became almost painful. Finally, the recording ended. Margaret's attorney immediately stood. A dying man burdened by guilt isn't automatically reliable. Jonathan nodded politely. Which is why we also brought witnesses. The courtroom doors opened. An elderly woman slowly entered with the help of a cane. Ruth Coleman, the retired maternity nurse. She raised her hand, swore to tell the truth, then quietly repeated everything she had told Emily and me. The baby survived. I personally examined her. I saw Margaret Doyle remove the infant. I never saw a death certificate. Margaret's attorney tried to challenge her memory. Mrs. Coleman, you're 81 years old. Can you truly remember events from 43 years ago? Ruth smiled gently. I delivered thousands of babies. But only one mother nearly died while her healthy child disappeared. I remember Susan. I remember that baby. I remember because it haunted me. The courtroom fell silent again. Jonathan presented the burial records. No permit for infant remains. No record of a body. Then came the cemetery paperwork. Empty casket. Then the financial records. $75,000. Transfers. Debts. Repayments. Every piece fit perfectly. Margaret's attorney looked increasingly uncomfortable. But Jonathan wasn't finished. Your Honor, we have one final exhibit. He looked toward Ryan. Ryan stood slowly. His hands shook, not from fear, from heartbreak. He connected his phone to the courtroom speakers. I found these in my father's backup files. Margaret looked confused, then frightened. A familiar voice echoed through the room. Her own. Michael, if Susan finds out, I'll tell Ryan exactly why his law firm survived. Another message. I created one false death record. I can make other documents disappear too. Another. You owe me. You signed the papers. I only made them possible. The recording stopped. Margaret's face turned completely white. She stood abruptly. They're edited. They're fake. Ryan looked directly at her. No. They're the truth. The judge quietly removed his glasses. He looked toward Margaret. Mrs. Doyle, do you wish to respond? For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she slowly sat back down. Her attorney leaned over and whispered something. She shook her head. No. That single word sounded defeated. The judge reviewed the documents for several minutes. No one spoke. Finally, he looked up. The court finds substantial evidence supporting the validity of the revised trust. He continued. The estate amendments remain in effect. Emily quietly closed her eyes. The judge wasn't finished. The evidence also establishes probable cause regarding forged documents, fraudulent representations, and interference with estate records. He looked directly at Margaret. The court refers these matters to the appropriate investigative authorities. The gavel struck. It was over. Not everything, but enough. As people slowly left the courtroom, reporters gathered outside. Jonathan advised us to leave through a side hallway. We walked quietly together. Just before reaching the exit, I heard footsteps behind us. Margaret. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't pretending anymore. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Not tears of grief. Tears of defeat. Susan. I turned around. She whispered one sentence. I thought I was saving all of you. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I answered quietly. You never asked whether we wanted to be saved. I turned away. This time, she didn't follow. 3 days after the hearing, Margaret called me. I almost ignored it. Then I answered. "What do you want?" Her voice sounded tired, not frightened anymore, just tired. "I'd like to see you." I have nothing left to say. "I do." I hesitated. "If you're bringing lawyers," "I'm not." "If you're bringing excuses," there was a long pause. "I probably am." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I expected an apology. Because I wanted to hear one final time how she had justified stealing my child. We met at the church where our family had worshipped for decades. It was quiet, empty. Margaret sat alone in one of the back pews. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. When I sat beside her, neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, she whispered, "I never hated you." I looked straight ahead. "That makes it worse." She nodded slowly. "I suppose it does." She folded her hands. "You were 23. You nearly died. Michael was drowning in debt. I thought—" She stopped. "I thought I was saving everyone." I turned toward her. "You never asked me." "I couldn't. You were unconscious." "Then you should have waited." The Brooks family was leaving. The arrangements had already been made. "The money," I interrupted. "There it is." She lowered her eyes. "It wasn't about money." "No, it kept Michael's law practice alive. It kept your home. It kept Ryan's future." I shook my head. "It stole my daughter's future with me." Margaret closed her eyes. I truly believed she'd have a better life. "Did she?" I asked. "Yes." Emily had loving parents, a safe home, a good education. But none of those things erased what had been taken. "I don't resent the Brooks family," I said quietly. "I resent you." Margaret nodded. "I understand." "No." "You don't. You watched me place flowers on an empty grave. You stood beside me every Mother's Day. You hugged me while I cried." Her shoulders trembled. "I know. You knew she was alive." "I did." "You let me suffer." "I did." She finally looked at me. I've replayed those moments thousands of times. I should have confessed. The first year. The second. The 10th. But every year became harder. I almost laughed. That's exactly what Michael said. Tears filled Margaret's eyes. He was never cruel. He was weak. And I kept giving him reasons to stay weak. I looked at her for a long moment. For the first time, she wasn't defending herself. She was describing herself honestly. But honesty, after 43 years, could never return my child. The church doors opened. Ryan walked in first. Emily followed him. Neither of them had wanted me to meet Margaret alone. They quietly approached. Margaret looked at them, then lowered her head. Ryan spoke first. "I heard you were meeting. I thought Mom shouldn't be alone." Margaret smiled sadly. "You used to call me every Sunday." "I know," Ryan answered. "I used to believe you." Emily remained silent. She stood beside me. Margaret looked at her. "I never hated you either." Emily finally spoke. "I don't need you to hate me. I just wish you had loved my mother enough to tell her." The words hung in the air. Margaret had no answer. After several seconds, she whispered, "I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It wasn't enough. But it was real." I looked at her. "I believe you're sorry." She seemed surprised. "But being sorry isn't the same as making things right." She nodded slowly. "I know. I can't give you back those years." "No. You can't." Silence returned. Margaret reached into her handbag. She removed a thick envelope. I found these. I stared at it. The original hospital records. Ryan looked shocked. You still had them? I couldn't destroy them. She handed them to me. They belong to you. My fingers shook as I opened the envelope. Original birth records, original transfer documents, original forged signature pages. Everything. 43 years of lies, reduced to paper. Jonathan would finally have every missing piece. Margaret stood slowly. I'll cooperate with investigators. I won't fight anymore, Ryan asked quietly. Why now? She looked toward the stained glass windows. Because I lost. Emily shook her head gently. No. You lost years ago. You just didn't know it. Margaret accepted the truth without arguing. She walked toward the church doors. Halfway there, she stopped. Without turning around, she whispered, I hope someday you become the family I prevented. Then she left. None of us followed. For several minutes, we simply stood together. Ryan looked at Emily. I've been thinking. So have I, she answered. He smiled awkwardly. I've spent 39 years wishing I had a sister. Emily laughed softly through tears. I've spent 43 wishing I had a brother. Ryan opened his arms. This time, let's not waste any more years. They hugged, longer than before, stronger than before. Watching them together hurt and healed me at exactly the same time. I felt someone gently take my hand. Emily. She looked at me, not uncertain anymore. Not afraid. Her eyes filled with tears. Then, almost as if the word surprised even her, she whispered, Mom. Everything inside me stopped. 43 years. I had imagined hearing that word from my daughter thousands of times. At birthdays, graduations, wedding days. Instead, I heard it in an empty church after the greatest heartbreak of my life. I wrapped my arms around her. Neither of us spoke. We simply cried. Ryan quietly wiped his own eyes. I guess he smiled through tears. Our family finally has the missing chair filled. I looked at both of them. My son, my daughter, standing together. The family photograph in my living room had been incomplete all these years. Not anymore. As we walked toward the parking lot, I looked down at the envelope of hospital records in my hands. The evidence no longer mattered as much as it had a week ago. The court had already recognized the truth. Now, something more important had happened. My daughter had finally called me Mom. And no court, no lie, no stolen document could ever take that away again. A week after the court hearing, Emily called me just after sunrise. I was thinking about the cemetery. I knew exactly which cemetery she meant. The one where I had spent 43 years talking to an empty grave. I've been thinking about it too, I said. There was a pause. Would you go with me? I don't want to go alone. Neither did I. An hour later, Ryan picked me up. Emily was already sitting in his truck. When I climbed inside, neither of them spoke. There are moments when silence says everything. This was one of them. The cemetery looked exactly as it always had. The same winding road, the same old oak trees, the same rows of white headstones. Nothing had changed. Except me. I carried a bouquet of white lilies. For years I believed they were flowers for my daughter. Today, they felt like flowers for a life that had been stolen. We stopped in front of the small granite marker. Anna Gallagher, beloved daughter, forever in our hearts. I stared at those words for a long time. Every letter had once comforted me. Now they felt like part of a terrible lie. Emily stood quietly beside me. This is where you came every year. I nodded. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every Mother's Day. I talked to you. My voice trembled. I told you about Ryan. I told you about school. I told you about your father. I even apologized because I thought my body had failed you. Emily wrapped an arm around my shoulders. You never failed me. I couldn't stop crying. I missed your first steps. Your first day of school. Your graduation. Everything. You missed those things. Emily whispered. But you never stopped loving me. Ryan quietly stepped away, giving us privacy. Emily knelt in front of the headstone. She gently touched the engraved name. I spent my whole life wondering where I belonged. I always felt grateful to my parents. They loved me. They gave me everything. She smiled softly. But there was always a question I couldn't answer. Who did I come from? She looked at me. Now I know. She placed her hand over mine. And knowing you doesn't erase them. I nodded. I wouldn't want it to. She looked relieved. I've worried about that. I don't want to replace Linda. You never could. I smiled through my tears. And you never need to. She raised you. I gave birth to you. Those are different gifts. Emily hugged me tightly. I think she'd like you. I laughed softly. I think I'd have liked her. For a few minutes, we simply stood together. Then Ryan walked back carrying a small shovel. I talked to the cemetery office. You did. They approved it. He handed me a folded document. Permission to replace the memorial marker. I looked at him. You arranged this? I thought. He swallowed. The truth deserves a place too. The new design had already been drafted. Instead of pretending Anna was buried there, it would read, In loving memory of the years we lost, Anna Gallagher. Born October 13th, 1983, forever loved, forever found. I traced the words with my fingertips. No lies, no false burial. Only truth. Emily smiled. I like that. So do I. Ryan carefully removed the old bouquet from the previous week. I laid the fresh lilies beside the stone. Then I did something I had never imagined. I whispered, Goodbye. Emily looked at me. To who? I smiled sadly. To the mother who believed her daughter was buried here. I don't need to be her anymore. The wind moved gently through the trees. For the first time, the cemetery didn't feel like a place of death. It felt like the place where a lie finally ended. As we walked back toward the truck, I stopped one last time. I reached into my purse. The opal ring rested inside a small velvet pouch. For decades, I believed it belonged beneath this ground. Michael had built an entire story around it. Now I understood. The ring had never belonged in a grave. It belonged with the daughter who survived. I held it in my palm. The opal caught the afternoon sunlight. Emily looked at it quietly. You're keeping it. I am. She seemed surprised. I thought you might bury it. I slowly shook my head. No. It spent too many years hiding the truth. I'm not burying it ever again. Ryan smiled. I think Dad would understand. I looked at the ring. I hope he finally does. On the drive home, none of us wanted the day to end. Ryan suggested lunch. We found a small diner overlooking the river. The conversation felt different now, lighter. Not because the pain had disappeared, because we no longer carried it alone. Ryan laughed as Emily described one of her childhood camping trips. She laughed when Ryan admitted he had burned Thanksgiving rolls 3 years in a row without telling anyone. I simply watched them. brother, sister. The relationship should have started decades earlier, yet somehow they were finding each other anyway. Halfway through lunch, Emily reached across the table. She took my hand. "I've been wondering about something. What if we'd grown up together? Do you think we'd have been close?" I smiled. "You and Ryan?" She nodded. I looked at them both. Ryan answered before I could. "We probably would have fought over the bathroom every morning." Emily laughed. "And Mom would have blamed both of us." I laughed with them. The sound felt unfamiliar, not forced, real. For months, every memory had been wrapped in grief. Now, for the first time, a new memory existed. One without lies. One with all three of us together. As the sun began to set, we drove back toward my house. When we reached the front porch, Ryan stopped before getting into his truck. "I've got an idea." "What is it?" He looked at Emily. "Thanksgiving." Emily smiled. "What about it?" "We've always set 3 places at the table." He looked at me. "This year, we set 4. I felt tears gathering once more. Not tears of loss. Tears of gratitude. Because after 43 years of believing my family had been broken forever, it was finally beginning to grow again. I unlocked the front door. For the first time since Michael's funeral, walking into the house didn't feel like stepping into a museum of memories. It felt like walking toward a future. One that had arrived decades late, but one I intended to treasure for every day I had left. Thanksgiving arrived sooner than I expected. For years, the holiday had followed the same routine. Michael carved the turkey. Ryan watched football. I made too much stuffing. And every year, without realizing why, I always set the table with 1 extra serving spoon. Michael used to smile when he noticed. "I guess we're expecting company." Neither of us ever said the rest out loud. Somewhere deep inside us, there had always been an empty place at the table. This year, it finally had a name. Emily. I woke before sunrise. The house smelled of cinnamon and fresh bread. For the first time since Michael's death, the kitchen didn't feel painfully quiet. Instead, it felt full of possibility. At 8 o'clock, the front door opened. Ryan walked in carrying 2 pumpkin pies. Emily followed him with a casserole dish. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." She said it so naturally that I almost cried again. Instead, I smiled. "Happy Thanksgiving," Ryan laughed. "You two are going to make me emotional before breakfast." Emily smiled. "Too late." We spent the morning cooking together. Ryan still couldn't make gravy without asking questions every 5 minutes. Emily admitted she had never successfully baked homemade biscuits. We laughed when flour somehow ended up across the kitchen floor. For a few wonderful hours, we weren't talking about court, or lies, or graves. We were simply becoming a family. Around noon, Emily wandered into the living room. She stopped in front of the old family photographs. One frame still showed only Michael, Ryan, and me. She studied it quietly. "I don't want you to take these down." I walked beside her. "I wasn't planning to." She looked relieved. "I don't want anyone pretending Michael never loved you." I nodded. "He did love us." She touched the edge of the frame. "He loved me too. He just didn't know how to choose courage." That sentence stayed with me. People often think love and courage always arrive together. They don't. Michael loved deeply. He simply wasn't brave enough to protect the people he loved. That failure cost all of us decades. Ryan walked into the room carrying another box. "I found something." "What is it?" "Dad's old photo albums." We sat together on the living room floor. Page after page showed birthdays, Vacations, school concerts, family picnics. Emily laughed at Ryan's terrible haircut when he was 12. Ryan smiled at pictures of my younger self. Then we reached the final album. Tucked inside the back cover was one loose photograph. It showed Michael sitting alone in a park. His eyes weren't looking at the camera. They were focused on someone outside the frame. Emily quietly reached into her purse. She removed another photograph, the missing half. The two pictures fit together perfectly. Michael had cut them apart years earlier. One half stayed with him, the other stayed with Emily. I looked at the complete image. A father, a daughter, meeting in secret because of one terrible decision made decades before. Ryan stared at it. He wanted to remember. Emily nodded. But he couldn't display it. I slipped the two halves into a new frame. They stay together now. No one disagreed. Later that afternoon, we finally gathered around the dining table. 4 place settings, exactly as Ryan had promised. Before anyone touched the food, he stood. "I want to say something." Emily smiled. "You're giving the speech." "I guess I am." He looked at me first. "Mom, you spent 43 years believing you lost your daughter." Then he turned toward Emily. "You spent 43 years wondering where you came from." He swallowed hard. "I spent 39 years not knowing I had a sister." His eyes filled with tears. "We can't change those years." "But we don't have to lose another one." He raised his glass. "To truth." Emily raised hers. "To family." I lifted mine. "To second chances." For the first time in decades. Thanksgiving felt complete. After dinner, Emily asked if she could help wash dishes. As we stood together at the sink, I reached into my pocket, the velvet pouch. She noticed immediately. "The ring?" I nodded. I opened the pouch. The opal shimmered beneath the kitchen light. "I've thought about this every day." Emily looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I finally know where it belongs." I gently placed the ring into her hand. She looked startled. "I can't." "Yes, you can. It belonged to your grandmother. It belonged to me. And now, it belongs to you." Tears filled her eyes. "This is too much." I closed her fingers around it. "No. For 43 years, this ring carried a lie. Your father used it to hide the truth. I'm giving it to you for the opposite reason. So the truth is never hidden again." Emily couldn't speak. She simply hugged me for a long time. When she finally stepped back, she whispered, "I promise." "What? If I ever have children, they'll know exactly who they are. They'll know your story. They'll know mine. And they'll know that secrets don't protect families. They break them." I smiled. That's all I've ever wanted. That evening, after Ryan and Emily drove home, I sat alone on the front porch. The house was quiet again, but not lonely. I looked up at the stars. For months, I had wondered how to remember Michael. As a loving husband, a terrible father, a broken man. The answer finally came. He was all of those things. Love did not erase his betrayal. His betrayal did not erase every good thing he had ever done. Human beings are rarely only one thing. I chose not to spend the rest of my life defending him, but I also refused to spend it hating him. That would have given his mistakes one final victory. Instead, I chose my children, both of them. The cemetery no longer held my daughter. The lies no longer held my family. And the ring that Michael once used to hide the truth had become the first gift I ever placed into my daughter's hand, with nothing left to conceal. When I finally turned off the porch light that night, I realized something I never thought possible. I had gone to my husband's funeral, believing I was burying the last chapter of my life. Instead, that funeral became the day my daughter came home. Sometimes the greatest wounds in a family are not caused by hatred. They are caused by fierce silence and the belief that one terrible lie can protect the people we love. For 43 years, I thought grief was something you simply learned to carry. I believed healing meant accepting that some questions would never be answered. But life taught me something very different. The truth may arrive late, painfully late. It may cost relationships, reputations, and the version of the past we once treasured. But truth also gives us something lies never can: peace. Michael spent decades believing he was protecting me. In reality, every year he remained silent became another year stolen from our family. His regret was real, but regret alone could never restore what had been lost. Only honesty could begin that work. I also learned that forgiveness is not the same as pretending nothing happened. Forgiveness doesn't erase responsibility. It doesn't rewrite history. Sometimes forgiveness simply means refusing to let another person's worst decision become the final chapter of your own life. Emily taught me another beautiful lesson. Love is not limited by biology. The parents who raised her loved her deeply, and I will always honor them for giving my daughter the life I was denied. Loving them does not mean she loved me any less. The human heart has room for more than one family, more than one kind of love, and more than one beginning. If sharing my story helps even one family choose honesty before it's too late, then every painful memory I have shared today has been worthwhile. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this journey. Now, I'd truly love to hear from you. If you were in my place, could you ever forgive Michael? Or do you believe some betrayals can never be forgiven? And one more question that stayed with me ever since this story began. Who bears the greater responsibility? Michael, who chose silence, or Margaret, who created the lie? Please share your thoughts in the comments because I genuinely love to read every perspective. If this story moved, you don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more emotional family stories that remind us how powerful truth, love, and second chances can be. Thank you for spending your time with me today, and wherever you are in the world, I hope you and the people you love always choose honesty before fear.